I was talking with a mentor, a ministerial colleague this past spring, and our conversation came around to me asking them a pretty straightforward question. I asked, how would you define what church is? They didn't hesitate. Their response was this: church is a voluntary organization of people who have made a commitment or set an intention to change themselves. I wrote it down. I've been thinking about this definition a lot since that conversation. A voluntary organization of people who have made a commitment or set an intention to change themselves. It inspired me to think about the ways we change as human beings, the things that help us become better versions of ourselves, what we define as better and why, where we find inspiration, motivation, even a sense of obligation for that work. It made me think about what we have in common as human beings and ways we're different, and how great it is that we are both the same and different, that we are autonomous and helplessly interconnected. I wonder if you would agree. Are we an organization of people who have made a commitment to change ourselves? What would grow out of a conversation where we all shared what we thought about that? Where we all shared our intentions for changing ourselves? Were you seeking change when you first started coming to church? Are you committed to changing yourself? Does church help you with that work? And if so, how? I can say for myself, I started coming to church when I was very young. So really my first experiences were initiated by my parents, not by my own free will. And I believe they started coming not because they were actively trying to change themselves so much as wanting the possibility of church influencing or changing their children. And as an adult, I can say with some certainty that I first started coming back to church after my children were born. And I was not thinking about joining the congregation as something that would serve my own growth, so much as I was remembering the ways it had served my growth as a child, and I wanted that same opportunity for my own children. But of course, I have engaged in changing myself in significant ways here. My understanding of Unitarian Universalism has changed. My understanding of myself has changed. In serving this organization, I have learned and grown and changed in really significant ways. And my commitment to changing myself might be one of the bigger changes I credit to my belonging to this organization of people. I shared Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer this morning because it speaks to something I've found to be very true. In most situations, you cannot make someone else do something they do not want to do. The only choices that you really have control over are your own choices. That's true for all of us, although I recognize there's all kinds of exceptions. But really, I cannot heal my loved one who struggles with alcoholism, but I can examine my own relationship with alcohol. I can set boundaries with that loved one. Those boundaries allow me to love them while I try not to enable their destructive behaviors. I can't force a dear friend to slow down and grieve a big loss, but I can grieve myself, and I can keep checking in with them and let them know I'm here. I can be ready when they're ready to grieve with them. I can't make cruise ships disappear, but I can choose not to take cruises. Serenity in the prayer isn't idyllic. It isn't a naive aspiration. It is, as Niebuhr describes it, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace. It's letting the broken exist and using our energy to heal what we can heal. In her sermon last week, Reverend Susan said, at its best, Unitarian Universalism is an ever-evolving, revelatory faith that encourages human growth and spiritual maturation, and it is a lifetime endeavor. None of us are obligated to be here, and yet here we are. Here we are engaged in human growth and spiritual maturation. Here we are changing ourselves. And I have to say, people who are committed to changing themselves, those are my people. No matter how much you have to change, seat me at the table with the messy, imperfect souls who are actively examining their mess. Please. I think I'm in the right place if that's what we're doing here. I also think we need as many of us as possible because our world needs for humankind to change, not a little change, but fundamental change. Wendell Berry, in his book titled The Long-Legged House, wrote about how his worldview changed after moving back home to his family land in Kentucky. As he offers his readers a visual of this land, he describes the benefit of hindsight in illuminating for himself the damage that had been done there. And he names a critical mistake that European settlers made when they began to live by the assumption that what was good for us, for them, would be good for the world. Barry points out that that assumption was based on an even flimsier assumption that we could know with any certainty what was good even for us. And now, he says, perhaps very close to too late, our great error has become clear. He writes, it is not only our own creativity, our own capacity for life that is stifled by our arrogant assumption. The creation itself is stifled. We have been wrong, he says. We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by a contrary assumption, that what is good for the world will be good for us. What is good for the world will be good for us. He goes on, that requires that we make the effort to know the world and to learn what is good for it. We must learn to cooperate in its processes and to yield to its limits. But even more important, we must learn to acknowledge that the creation is full of mystery. We will never entirely understand it. We must abandon arrogance and stand in awe. We must recover the sense of majesty of creation and the ability to be worshipful in its presence. Barry says, I do not doubt that it is only on the condition of humility and reverence before the world that our species will be able to remain in it. Together, as an organization of people, we can collaborate in the work of this kind of change. We can't do it alone, but we each still have to commit to doing it, and we need one another. We have so much to learn from one another. We can help each other to abandon arrogance and stand in awe. We can share the load for one another on the days we need to rest. We can inspire one another, witness one another, push one another. At its best, Unitarian Universalism is an ever-evolving, revelatory faith that encourages human growth and spiritual maturation, and it is a lifetime endeavor. And so here we are, praying together, for the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Here we are, each having set an intention to change ourselves and volunteering to do that work together. Here we are. Amen.